Hi there, this is David and welcome to the top 10 most boring games that I've ever played. Over the course of 40 odd years, I've played a metric ton of games, and believe me whenever I tell you that they are not all created equal. Some are short and tight, keeping me on the edge of my seat, while others drag and drone and only put me to sleep in my chair. And that to me is the benchmark of what can be on this list. Have I fallen asleep while playing it? If the answer is yes, then it's officially a boring RPG. So, let's have a walk down memory lane and revisit some of the most boring RPGs that I've ever played. Number 10. The Seven Saga, released for the SNES. Don't get me wrong here, I really do like the Seven Saga, but at the same time, I mean, the grind. I played this game religiously as a child, and I actually beat it with all of the heroes. So either that's a testament to just how boring growing up in the North Georgia mountains is, or to just how few RPGs there were to play in the early 90s, or maybe both. Whatever. I fell asleep playing this at quite a few points though. Firstly outside of Bonro and Zealous trying to recruit the right partner, and then much later, grinding incessantly to get the Sky Rune back. Little did I know that though, the more that you grind, the worse you're off against those apprentice battles. I really wish that I knew that back then. Number 9. Chrono Cross, released for the PlayStation. It should come as no surprise to anybody watching that I'm really not a fan of this game. The only good thing that it has going for it is the music, but that's a double-edged sword. The percussive tropical theme songs are so well done and so relaxing that I've actually fallen asleep to them. However, the final nail in the coffin is that everything looks the same. The difference between the home world and another world is minuscule. Nothing really changes at all. The town, the character placement, and even the overworld is just all the same. And how can anything be more boring than doing the same thing over and over and over again? Number 8. Luffia, The Ruins of Bor, released for the Game Boy Advance. And yes, I mean Bor. I love the Luffia series, and while the first one was pretty much just a Dragon Quest clone, the developers created something special with their second outing, and I thoroughly enjoyed the Game Boy Color iteration. So I was looking forward to the fourth game in the series, which harkened back to Luffia 2, taking place in the same world just 20 years later. All of the ingredients were there, but they went ahead and they killed it with unlikable characters, a completely unbalanced job class system, and an insipid storyline. This is one of the very few games that I've played multiple times, trying to like it, but I've never actually beaten it. Number 7. Tales of Legendia, released for the PlayStation 2. I like the Tales games, they really are my favorites, right up there with Final Fantasy and Dragon Quest, so I was thrilled to play Legendia. But it does have some similarities to Chrono Cross that I'm just not a fan of. Not only is your movement slow, but the dungeons are exceptionally large, and the music does nothing to keep you awake and engaged. But then, the real boringness occurs in the second half of the game, where the voice acting becomes non-existent, and you're forced to go back through all the dungeons that you just went through again. Remember Bravely Default's second half and how terrible that was? Well, at least there you could fast forward and turn off random encounters. No such luck here. Number 6. The Atelier Arlen series, released on the PlayStation 3. Let me be clear here, I'm not referring to the Iris series back on the PlayStation 2 because those were great. I'm talking about the mainline series where you sit around a pot and you craft for a year and a day. There's nothing more frustrating and boring to me than having to make a bunch of smaller items to utilize as stepping stones to create more powerful items. It's just a never-ending process. And God forbid if you're missing an ingredient and you have to go back to a dungeon and harvest more stuff, it's just so frustrating I can't stand it. Though I have seen some good things about the latest installment. If he was in the games that I played in the PlayStation 3, then I'm sure that I would have stuck around. Number 5. Zeno Saga 2, released for the PlayStation 2. I played this game back in my heyday of you have to play every single JRPG ever phase that I was going through, but I think that this game is the one that cured me of that. This was the first game that I ever said, screw this. I'm just going to quit right here and watch the ending on YouTube. If it wasn't for Zeno Saga 3 and the storyline connections, I probably wouldn't have even done that. Zeno Saga 1 and 3 are pretty great games, but this game really epitomizes a grave sin during the PlayStation 2 era, when games went from like 40 hours to about 80. They filled it with filler and exceedingly long cutscenes for no real reason. I mean, just because developers could make super long games didn't mean that they should. Get to the point, people. Number 4. Apuna, released for the Nintendo Wii. The Wii was the first Nintendo console that I bought since the SNES, and they had backwards compatibility, so I was able to play the GameCube RPGs that I missed out on, while I waited for the great Wii RPGs that I knew were just over the horizon. Apuna came out and I bought it on day one, hoping that it would be like a turn-based Star Ocean. But it was nothing but. This is the most boring, convoluted mess of a game that I've ever played. It took me like 2 hours just to get out of the first town. Then, whenever I got into the battles, they're all timed. If you don't win a battle in 2 minutes, it's game over. And they're like hard as balls, utilizing the Wiimote to attack and dodge, like, what the hell? Then, there's the job system, and it's not classes. It's like literal jobs that you take on, like a fisherman or something. It's so boring, I can't stand it. Number 3. The Gagheart Trilogy, released on the PSP. I played these 3 games on the PSP before ever playing Trails in the Sky, and quite honestly, I don't know how I ever got through them. From the god-awful translations with their ridiculous dialogue, to the massively long stretches with no action whatsoever, to the just downright boring plot. They really require you to be in love with the series to get through them all. I played the 3 of them whenever I first moved to Nevada and my consoles were all boxed up, so I only had my DS and my PSP out. And I didn't know anybody here, so I just kinda sat at home and played the trilogy for like 2 weeks straight. I was bored out of my mind then, but looking back, it was kind of a nice relaxing summer. Number 2. ArcheAge 1 and 2, released on the PlayStation 2. There was a time in my life, mostly during the PlayStation 2 era, where I felt that I had to play every single JRPG ever released, no matter how good it was, or how much it interested me. And that's how I got sucked into this series. Maybe diving into women's cosmospheres is titillating for teenagers or straight guys, but to me, it was gross and dumb. The worst part though was those long dating scenes with the various girls. Nowadays, if I ever played a game like this, I would probably just kind of fast forward through those endless scenes, but back then, not only did I force myself to play all these games, I forced myself to watch them all too. And thankfully, I've moved on from that phase in my life because man, these games were so boring. And finally, number 1, Harvest Moon, released for the SNES. I remember reading about this one in Nintendo Power. Oh boy, I get to run my own farm! This will be so cool, so unique, so interesting, so boring. Oh my god, I know that they've made this series much better lately. But if any of you out there have ever played the original one on console, you know exactly what I'm talking about. You end up praying for rain because you will just spend forever watering each individual plant. And even whenever you get the watering can upgrade, you still can't water all of your crops correctly if you utilized your 9x9 grid correctly. And don't get me started on clearing the field on the very first night. I could not have been the only one who spent hours breaking all the rocks, picking all the weeds, and chopping down all the stumps as soon as possible. Well, that's it for the top 10 most boring games that I've ever played. If you like this video and what I do here on the channel, please consider supporting me on Patreon for exclusive videos and early access to my content. The link to it can be found in the video description. This has been David. If you like this, please like, comment, and subscribe, and have a good day.